The social side of Persona 5 is really important to me because I don't do much socializing in real life. Nah, I'm just kidding. I have no desire to socialize. But hey, they attached some game mechanics to it, so let's take a look. The main driving mechanic behind Persona's social game is time management. Kind of. I say kind of because I'm not really sure I'd call it time management. I mean, there are definitely time-sensitive events, things I want to do on certain days, and other shit like that. But is that really time management? I suppose it is in the plainest sense of the word, but I don't really feel like I'm managing my time. And the reason for this is that the time-spending events are all largely isolated. Whenever I have a chunk of time to spend, I basically look at all my options and then pick whichever one I care about most at the moment. Is there a confidant whose abilities I really want? They get high priority. Confidants with limited access, like Sun, who's only available on Sundays? Also high priority. Social stats generally get low priority until one of them is blocking something, and then it gets high priority. Palaces start with low priority, but get higher as their deadline approaches, and Mementos gains a little priority for each active request you have. But I wouldn't call any of this time management, I'd call it priority management. So what's my idea of time management? Well, how about an example from the Atelier series? I've mainly only played the Arland games, but in those I remember doing plenty of actual planning for my time. I'd get a new set of requirements for my next license level or whatever the fuck it was, then I'd start considering how to go about them. What dungeon areas will I need to go to? What are the best routes I can take to get to all of them? How many trips should it be split into, and how long will each one be? Which one will I go on first? When do I need to finish it by, and by extension, when do I have to leave by? Great, now that I know that, let's put together a list of all the enemies and materials that will be on my path for this journey, and pick up any relevant hunt or fetch quests that pop up before I leave. And now that I know how much time I have to do alchemy, what do I need to make? And with any spare time, what do I want to make? By thinking about all this and planning ahead, I'm not just affecting what I get out of my time, but how much I get. That's the type of thing I feel is lacking in Persona's time management. In Persona 5, unless I let it get to the point where I start having nothing of optimal value to do with a chunk of time, I'm simply deciding the order that I do things in. And avoiding having nothing to do is, for the most part, just a matter of prioritizing things that aren't as far along. The time-spending choices that do affect the efficiency of your time are either really easy to get right, like only going to the bathhouse on Mondays, Thursdays, or rain days, or things that you need luck or a guide to take advantage of, like when you get invited to a movie. Hell, the latter there could easily be improved simply by having your friend call you Monday to go out Sunday. At least then you could try to prioritize that friend until you get them into a non-rank up state. Could also maybe have some confidants that you can spend time with together, like early on you can hang out with Ryuji and An together, then later Ryuji and Yusuke or An and Makoto. And then you can work towards getting the members of these pairs to both be in need of affinity points. Could also make some fun little scenes out of some of these if they want. Even changing Chihaya to have more limited readings like I suggested in another video could allow you to optimize your luck readings by finding opportunities to work on the same social stat twice in one day. Admittedly, these ideas don't add too much depth to the game's time management, though I do think they would be nice little improvements. Ultimately though, I'm having trouble coming up with a way to make the time management aspect of Persona more meaningful without drastic changes to how the game works. Of course, this isn't something that necessarily needs more depth. I think it'd be cool if there was some, but it wouldn't be that terrible if time efficiency simply remains a matter of how good you are at getting through palaces in as few days as possible and picking the right dialogue choices with your confidants. Which I suppose are things I should mention. Well, the palace efficiency was already discussed in detail in the pacing video, but let's talk about the dialogue choices. Am I alone in not liking them being attached to affinity points? I feel like most people like it this way, which is fine. It makes sense thematically, and there's nothing inherently wrong with it working like that. I just prefer choices to be like in the main game, where I can pick the dialogue choice I like best, rather than having to try and guess which choice the developers think the character I'm talking to would like the most. I mean, for the most part, there's 4 ways this can play out. There's an obvious best answer that is the best answer, in which case I just feel like I'm being forced to pick it. There's an obvious best answer that is not actually the best answer, in which case, fuck you too, developers. There's no obvious answer, in which case I feel like I'm playing a coin flip simulator. Or, the only actual good one, there's a subtly good answer that is the best answer. Of course, that's really hard to do well. Plus, even when you do, it only seems well done for the people who pick up on the subtle reason for it. Everyone else will just end up feeling like it's one of the other 3 scenarios. Hell, when looking for examples to show of those last two, I didn't even bother separating them, cause I'm pretty sure whichever ones I pick, there would be some people who think there's good reasons for the ones I call coin flips, and some people that think there's no good reason for the ones I think have clever best choices. The truth of it, though, is that there are no objectively right answers. There are arguably best answers, and some certainly have stronger arguments than others, but in many cases, especially those where you want the best answer to be subtle, you can come up with a decent argument why each answer could be considered the best. Whether or not you get it right often ends up being a matter of how similarly you think to the writers. And then there's the choices where no choice gives you points, or the best choice is only worth one musical note. But there's no way for me to know that, so I feel like I fucked up. I mean, I'm probably not supposed to worry about it, but if you don't want me to worry about it, then why does it affect stuff? And why even show me the musical notes if I'm not supposed to care if I get any? Obviously they're there to make you feel good when you pick a good thing to say, but how can I not then feel bad when I don't get the reward? If I don't get the reward, my confidence won't go up as fast. If they don't go up fast enough, I'll have to spend more days working on them. If I spend more days working on them, I might not have time to finish them all. Oh, whatever. Honestly, this is one of the things I used a guide for my first time through the game because, as explained, I don't find this aspect of the gameplay fun or engaging. If you do, that's cool, but I'd be interested to hear why. Is it really the guessing game that you enjoy, or is there some reason that I'm simply failing to think of? Regardless, perhaps you'd be open to some alternative means of raising your confidence affinities. My first thought for this was that some confidants could have mini-games when you spend time with them. Like a shooter minigame when you spend time with that annoying little kid, and a track minigame with Ryuji. The better you do in the minigame, the more affinity points you get. Then, about a minute later, I realized I would fucking hate that. So, next idea. Actually, the game already has some different means of progressing your confidants, like gating them behind social stats from Mementos targets. Hell, that little turd Mishida is all about completing Mementos missions. And of course, there's the Velvet Room Assistant's fusion tasks. I want more stuff like that. Like, again, for that annoying little kid, after he teaches you the special gun knockdown, you have to use it, or guns in general, a certain number of times before you can do his next rank up. And Chihaya and Kawakami can require you to use their services a certain number of times. Or you could leave the base system the same, but make those sorts of things add to the confidant's affinity. Sojiro already works that way with his coffee lessons. They clearly know how to do these sorts of things, they just need to apply it more. Every confidant could have some means of gaining affinity aside from just directly spending time with them. I suppose some people may argue that spending time is supposed to be your punishment for not answering the questions right, and these alternative means of gaining points devalue that, but, Chihaya exists, so that clearly isn't of concern to the developers. For me, at least, these kinds of alternatives would be a lot more interesting and make me a lot less obsessive about making sure I answer every dialogue choice correctly. And now let's talk about those social stats I've been mentioning. Social stats are a very important part of the Persona games because they give you shit to do on days when your confidants aren't available and take up a whole bunch of your social time throughout the game. Their effects aren't very interesting though. I mean, just because they exist primarily as time sinks to fill out your calendar doesn't mean they can't be spiced up a bit. Currently, for the most part, they just occasionally gate off a confidant. Can't we give them a little more to do? Okay, there are a couple additional effects. Knowledge ups your test scores, and proficiency lets you make more infiltration tools in a single day. But what about the other stats? Like, kindness could get you tips when you're working at part-time jobs. Guts can maybe let you give more expensive and personal gifts to help raise your confidence affinities faster, and charm could let random NPCs give you things when you talk to them. Okay, those ideas suck, but I'm sure the devs could come up with something decent for each stat. And in addition to a unique effect for each stat, there could also be some general bonuses. Like, each confidant could value one of the 5 social stats, and every time you spend time with them, you get a bonus affinity point for each level you have of that stat. Or maybe it could be easier to negotiate with shadows that value a social stat you've leveled up some. Maybe your social stats could give bonus battle stats. Like, whenever you fuse a persona, it could get a bonus point of the battle stat associated with each social stat you've maxed. Kindness could give bonus luck, cause karma. Proficiency gives agility, cause agility kinda doubles as the skill stat. Guts gives some endurance, cause you stand your ground with confidence. Knowledge gives magic, cause that's a pretty common RPG association. And lastly, charm gives strength. Cause, better yet, don't even limit it to 1 point. Just give Joker's equipped persona plus one of the associated battle stat for each level of each social stat. And then, for funsies, you could also give the other party members social stats, which give their personas the same bonus battle stats. You could also have their social stats go up as you do their confidant events and maybe certain story events. Of course, the others wouldn't get to max all the social stats, they'd have stats fitting for their personalities. Though maybe there could be ways of slowly bringing your ally stats up by spending time with them, but it'd be a very slow grind. Like, the type of thing someone might be working on during a New Game Plus when they've run out of everything else of value. I also don't like that you need max level for every social stat to be able to complete all your confidants. I guess it makes sense in the game currently, since that's pretty much the only value you get out of the social stats, but if some of these suggestions were added to the game, then you could make level 4 the highest required for any stat gates, and then maxing the social stats could be a low priority thing to do when you don't have any confidants to visit. As it is, I want to max my social stats fairly early so I can get the associated confidants going, but then I still gain those social stats from time to time, and it feels like a waste. Hell, if I'm not mistaken, you need level 5 kindness before you can do Sojoro's rank 7 event, during which you gain a few points of kindness. Wouldn't it be cool if those points weren't guaranteed to be useless? I think it would. Lastly, I want to talk about how affinity points don't carry over between ranks. As things are, I don't really like this. It doesn't make that big of a difference either way, since there's not all that much depth to the affinity point system, but as such, I mostly just see it as an annoyance. The one argument I can think of for why it's good the way it is that it allows the devs to put longer gaps where they make sense for the confidant's events. Like, if a confidant gets mad at Joker, then it requires a large amount of affinity points to get to the next rank up. This sort of thing doesn't come up too much though, so I'd be fine with them being special cases that don't carry over, while the majority do. That said, I would actually be fine with it being either way so long as they build things up to utilize the one they choose. For instance, the time management suggestions I made earlier, such as hanging out with multiple people at once, only actually add depth to the time management under the current system of no carryover. On the other hand, the suggestions I made in the Little Things Miscellanea video about certain dungeon crawling activities adding affinity to your confidants, such as gaining an affinity point for every new persona of the matching arcana, would work a lot better if the points did carry over. So there's potential for good design either way. I just hope they try to realize some of it in the future. So what do you think? Like Persona's time management the way it is? Got any better ideas for adding some depth to it? Do you like the dialogue guessing game? Think it's a good thing you're punished with a loss of time if you guess poorly? Like social stats giving almost nothing of value? Have any thoughts on affinity point carryover? Let me know and have an awesome day. So, I like that the game has an option to let text auto-advance or not, but why the fuck isn't there an option to only auto-advance if there's a fucking voice clip? I mean, don't get me wrong, I can read at least a 3rd grade level, so it's not too fast for me. But every once in a while I get distracted during a scene or something. And the worst thing is when I finish right as the auto-advance kicks in, so I advance the next dialogue immediately, especially if the next thing was a dialogue choice. I mean, the game has to know whether there's an audio clip or not, right? So why the fuck can't they only auto-advance when there is? Also, does anybody actually like auto-advance when there's no voice? Is putting the controller down really worth having to wait an extra 2 to 5 seconds between each line of dialogue? I feel like that would really hurt my ability to get immersed in a story. Whatever.